Well, the White House press corps expressing its extreme frustration, that's a quote, with the access they have been given to the president, complaining about a lack of transparency. Their current beef relates to this past weekend when the president, who of course the press follows everywhere, including all of his personal and professional outings, shut them out of his golf outing with Tiger Woods. They say they had zero access to our commander-in-chief the entire weekend down in Florida, and they are not happy. And now the president finds himself in a bit of a dust-up with the press. Who's on the right side? Joining me now, author Kevin McCullough. He's radio host of The Kevin McCullough Show. And Mark Hanna, who's an adjunct professor now of media studies at the New School and a former aide to the Obama and Kerry presidential campaign. So this is sort of rare when you see the White House Press Association standing up and saying, you're not transparent enough. It was the president is our own Ed Henry, but he speaks for the White House Correspondents Association, expressing this extreme frustration. Now, Kevin, I think the initial instinct is to say, why do they need to see the president golf with Tiger Woods? But this is what they do. News organizations spend a lot of money to send these reporters down there. We are paid to, and we pay to, watch him and report on him all the time.
It's part of the job, and it's part of the job that you know is part of the job when you take the job, and when you get reelected to the job, it should still be part of the job. As you're pointing out, Megyn, it was a vacation weekend, and the president was in a different place than the rest of the first family, and I can't begrudge anybody that is running an organization that they may want some time off or some downtime, et cetera, et cetera. But the problem is not just this one event. If it had just been this one occasion, then I think the press might not even care so much. But you've got, going back to the passage of Obamacare, all the way through Fast and Furious, all the way through Benghazi, all the way through current problems with the economy, that the White House press corps has never really been given straight answers on. And I think that when they experience this after a long history of that lack of transparency, frustration overwhelms them and they bubble up sometimes, even someone as coolly collected as Ed Henry.
Well, and it wasn't just Ed expressing his own personal frustration.
No,
he was talking on behalf of the association. But, Mark, you know, what do you think really went on here? Because the speculation is that the White House or the president didn't want the photo to come out of the president golfing with Tiger Woods, who used to be the storied golfer. But then, you know, all these reports of his multiple mistresses and, you know, these encounters with these porn stars and these XXX testimonials by these, you know, it's not the best photo op for President Obama, and maybe that's the reason he didn't want the press following them.
Or maybe the president didn't want Ed Henry shouting out questions about Benghazi while he was on his backswing, or maybe, you know, checking out, looking over his shoulder about whether he was replacing his divot or taking a mulligan. Yeah. Look, no, I think to be serious, this is an important issue, and I'm glad you're bringing it up, Megyn, because open government and government transparency are really hot topics about which a lot of Democrats are very concerned. So I think it's important that we're having this conversation. But let's put it in perspective here. When we're talking about transparency, it's one thing to talk about whether or not the press feels left out while the president's taking a vacation that not even his family is joining him on. Or whether, you know, 3 years ago we heard this because he went out and kind of absconded from the White House to see his daughter's soccer game and they didn't get tipped off and they complained a lot. So this smells a little bit like sour grapes. But when we're talking about transparency, this has been indeed the most transparent government, transparent presidency. And I hear Kevin laughing in the background.
I'm sorry,
I hear it too.
If any one of your viewers, let me just say, any one of your viewers can go to whitehouse.gov, see a list of everybody who's visited the White House. You can go to recovery.gov, see where every dollar of the stimulus was spent and the recovery was spent. You can go to usaspending.gov and see where all your tax dollars are going. So it's important for the government to be accountable. And after the most probably unaccountable presidency in recent history, this president realized he had to restore accountability to the Oval Office, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Go ahead, Kevin.
I think on part of the issue that Mark brings up is, Mr. Hanna, and congratulations on your professorate, by the way, and it's good to see you making that
Thanks,
stride.
Kevin. Good to see you,
but
too.
Here's the thing.
It is impressive.
What you're getting here is a lot of jot and tittle following what they said on stuff that most people don't know about and don't care about. And what you've had is about 4 or 5 big issues that have come through the administration, where you've had not just grudging reluctance to cooperate, you've had all-out obstruction in some places. And it started with Obamacare, where he was going to put the whole debate about health care reform on C-SPAN so that the world could see it. And the next thing you know, his lapdog, Speaker Pelosi's out there going, we got to pass it before anybody can read it. That was just how the whole gravy train started, all the way through Benghazi.
Well, listen, there have been complaints. I mean, I think it was the Associated Press did a survey back in 2011 that showed of the Freedom of Information Act requests. This is when the citizens or their representatives gin up a request that they want to, forget what the White House decides to post online, that people say, I want to know about Fast and Furious, or I want to know about this, that their record on transparency was not so good. In fact, they characterized it out of the 544,000 times that Freedom of Information Act requests were made of the 35 largest agencies, that the government responded to nearly 12,400 fewer requests than before. In any event, here's the question I have for you. Let me ask you this, though, Mark, because the thing where he absconded to go watch his daughter's soccer game and dodge the press, and this, it's like he's trying to have golf. Do we really need to watch this? But here's the deal. The reason that we do it is because everything he does makes news. And God forbid something happen to him. I mean, cruder people have put it as the death watch. You know, God forbid something were to happen to him. The press needs to be there. If he decides to make news in any way, the press needs to be there. People want to know. And for better or for worse, it's what these guys sign on to when they become our president. So does he really get to, Mark? Does he really get to dodge them when he goes golfing with Tiger?
Sure. Sure. No, I mean, there is this idea of the body watch, and I've heard that. I've traveled with the pool press and traveling press corps when I did advance work for Senator Kerry and then during the Obama campaign. And the idea, though, that the press gets access to everything that actually happens to the president or the vice president is just not true. I mean, there are private closed-door meetings with fundraisers. There are private dinners with his family that the press isn't in attendance on. Yes, they might be a stone's throw away, but the fact is, there are private meetings that the president does get to take that are off the record, that don't have press access. So, and to speak to the Freedom of Information Act requests, it is true that, yes, this president is, if you think of a captain of a ship, and the federal government is this gigantic ship, not every agency has been able to change its organizational culture in just a year or two, and there is a lot of room for improvement, for sure. I'll grant you that as a Democrat. But I think that, the explicit commitment to transparency is going to be a really strong part of this president's legacy for decades in the future.
And I do want to say, Kevin,
in
defense of the White House press corps, they were ticked off not just because of the Tiger Woods outing, but they say it was the entire weekend.
Right.
Which they say is very unusual.
Well,
the White House, by the way, says this is not unusual. Their statement was that the press access granted was entirely consistent with the press access offered for previous presidential golf outings.
Right. Of which this president has had a record number. But let me just say, this plays into one other narrative that I think even Mark would admit is probably not helpful in terms of whether it is pinpointed true or not. It's the feeling that the voters get, and that is that this president does what he wants. He makes up his own rules. He has joined the elites and kind of lives like the elites. And he's not remembering that he's accountable to we the people when it comes to these types of things. He works for us. He's our employee. He's not our ruler. He's our servant. He's our public servant. He administrates the country for us. And he has an accountability unlike any other person on the planet. And it's fair for us to be able to peek in and see what he's doing. Obviously, if he's on vacation with his family, I would say it's even more understood that he'll want some private time and time maybe when the cameras are gone. But this wasn't with family, by his choice.
This was with a controversial figure, Tiger Woods, for better or for worse. He used to be a star, but he knows what he did. He knows what he did.
He's a great American.
And now he's a very controversial figure.
I'm not down with calling it a Woods conspiracy. I think he has forgiveness. That's in the past. This is a general issue of transparency.
I don't know. You may have forgiven him.
Look, it's transparency, but we also live in a media culture.
With the reports. We remember the reports, the lengthy reports. Some of the ladies went on Howard Stern.
Just imagine what you're going to say about Cable Stevens in a couple of years, Megyn.
I got to leave it at that.
No more.
I got to go.
Okay.
Great job.